In 1864 to 1865, there were a series of battles called the Siege of Petersburg. They were battles of territory, the Union versus Confederacy, in a bloody match to cut off the supplies to Confederates in Petersburg. If the Union was successful and cut off all supplies to Petersburg, then it would do the same thing to a town called Richmond, which was about 25 miles from Petersburg and the capital for all Confederates. It would basically be a domino effect on the cities that rely on goods through the Petersburg railroad system. The siege of Petersburg was between Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. Ulysses S. Grant was hired by President Abraham Lincoln to take over Lee's army. If he did it, it would cut off all supplies to and from the Confederates through the railroad system in Petersburg. If Grant cut off the supplies, Lee would have no choice but to abandon Petersburg. Robert E. Lee was a part of the Confederacy, and the base for all Confederates was in Richmond, Virginia. But Petersburg was where the Confederates received all their goods. Ulysses S. Grant looked at the bigger picture. He took Petersburg instead of attempting to take Richmond. He knew that if he took Petersburg, it was only a matter of time before Richmond fell as well. Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee both went to West Point, and both were family men. They were similar in many ways. They both knew it would be a long battle, but eventually someone would be victorious. Ulysses S. Grant was a smart man who had many strategic plans to take Petersburg up his sleeve. He talked with his men a few hundred feet away from Richmond, and then started to prepare for the take over Lee's army, the Confederates. Then they were off. They walked all the way to James River and carefully made it over the pontoon bridge. The bridge was a major influence in the outcome of the battle because the pontoon bridge was half a mile long and easy to go across. The bridge helped the Union in the long run in taking over Petersburg. Once Grant and his men were across, they started to walk towards Petersburg and fight in one of the battles during the siege of Petersburg against the Confederates. Robert E. Lee had two objectives: one, to keep his army alive, and second, to keep Richmond safe. Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy, and if Richmond fell, the American Civil War would be closer to ending. But Grant had more men and more resources for the last battle, and already had a great tactic of going over the pontoon bridge to Petersburg. In the beginning, Grant attempted to take Petersburg but failed, so then he started to build war trenches. These trenches helped protect soldiers from gunfire. He built them in eastern Richmond and the outskirts of Petersburg. The trenches were a great resource for the Union because it helped protect the soldiers and made the odds more in their favor. Grant had 120,000 men compared to Lee, who had approximately half that amount. Throughout the battles, there were many casualties from both sides. In all, 11,386 lives were lost. The odds were against the Confederates, and in the end the Union won the last battle of the Siege of Petersburg, which led to Robert E. Lee surrendering at the Appomattox Courthouse after losing Petersburg and Richmond. Therefore, leaving the Union, Ulysses S. Grant's army victorious. After 10 months of fighting, it came to an end, and the American Civil War was this much closer to ending.